October 22nd, 1962.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
The decision was swiftly made. A quarantine would be established. Any ship of any nation carrying offensive weapons or components to Cuba would be turned back. For some days before the presidential announcement, lights had burned late in key Washington offices, as those most vitally involved in the nation's defense and security made ready to deal with the crisis. Well in advance, the Strategic Air Command had been put on super alert. Global disbursement and redeployment, increased in-flight readiness. Polaris subs, each with 16 nuclear missiles, would give added force to our announcement when it came. During the week preceding the president's speech, the Tactical Air Command had quietly repositioned thousands of men, tons of equipment, large numbers of fighter, reconnaissance, and troop carrier aircraft, mostly in Florida. Step by step, moment by moment, the key decisions of this crisis period were to come from the Executive Committee of the National Security Council. Overall responsibility for the military operations embodied in those decisions was to rest with Admiral Robert L. Commander-in-Chief, Atlantic. It would be a massive undertaking involving large elements of all the services. Ships moved out to establish a quarantine line through which no foreign vessel could pass unseen, while a second task force, including attack carriers such as the Enterprise, went into position for instant reaction should the defense of Guantanamo become necessary. With almost no advance notice, able to take with them only hand luggage, service dependents were evacuated from the naval base at Guantanamo. The quarantine to be effective required one of the most widespread, carefully coordinated maritime surveillance operations ever undertaken. Ships and aircraft of all services kept watch over thousands of square miles of ocean. All sightings were relayed swiftly to Sinkland at Norfolk. At the same time, both low and high-level reconnaissance photos taken by Marine, Navy, and Air Force pilots were providing a continuous flow of information as we monitored the progress of the crisis. Immediate reinforcement of the Guantanamo force was of prime importance. From stations in the United States, Marine Corps units went into action. These were units which were ready to go on an instant's notice. Their weapons and equipment were already loaded in trucks which stood waiting outside their barracks. In minutes, they were on their way. Within hours, airlift was landing these troops in Guantanamo, enough of them to double the fighting strength available there. In addition to the troops brought by air and ship, still others would be held ready on board ships at sea. Whatever might come, the Marines on Gitmo were ready. Simultaneously, within the United States, massive troop movements were swiftly carried out. Airborne forces prepared to board planes which would take them to marshalling areas in Florida, along with their equipment, rigged and ready for combat airdrop. In the tent cities which sprang up in Florida, they would receive detailed briefings on contingency plans and make sure that they were prepared to carry them out should the final orders come. At the same time, armored forces prepared to move from the southwest to positions from which they could swiftly embark. By train and by highway convoy, they moved out. Their destination, too, was Florida. Homestead Air Force Base near Miami became a center for joint military operations. Here, the forward headquarters of our land, the Army component of the overall Sinkland Command, was established. And here, too, tents and mobile communications equipment crowded one another beneath the pines. Our ground-to-air missile capability was greatly expanded along the southeastern sector of our national boundaries, as Hawk anti-aircraft missile batteries were brought from other areas of the nation and put into place. The deadly striking power of Nike Hercules batteries was also reinforced and held in an advanced state of readiness. Radar picket planes of the Air Force patrolled constantly, feeding information back to the command headquarters of the Air Defense Sector, which monitors our skies to the south. In their pre-positioned locations, fighter bombers of the Tactical Air Command were armed. Rockets, bombs, ammunition, air support for any limited war ground operation which might develop. Troop carrier squadrons of the Air Force Reserve, 24 of them, were called to active duty. Within 12 hours, all units were assembled and ready to go. As we awaited the results of an exchange of notes between Khrushchev and the President, nuclear bombers flew their precise, disciplined patterns within reach of the Soviet heartland. And beneath the Atlantic, the Polaris squadrons, mobile, nuclear launch pads were fully prepared to carry out whatever order might come. On October 28th, the Soviet decision was made, but our preparedness did not relax as we waited for the promised Soviet withdrawal. There was active rehearsal against a possibility not yet fully eliminated. Full-scale airborne maneuvers sharpened the battle skills of forces which had been alerted at the beginning of the crisis. Florida bases took on the appearance of active staging areas as armored forces rehearsed the moves laid out for them by contingency planners. Our intention and our determination remained clear for all to see. Toward the end of the acute period of crisis, the President traveled to Florida. The citation which he gave to an Air Force reconnaissance unit symbolized perhaps the wider gratitude of the nation to all the service people and dependents who met so well the sharp demands the crisis placed upon them. Highly effective air reconnaissance work made it possible for us to monitor what was happening in Cuba. Air photos gave us a clear picture of what we faced. And to give Screen Magazine audiences a close look at the story these photos had told as of late March 1963, here is Mr. John Hughes of the Defense Intelligence Agency.
The Soviet offensive military buildup in Cuba, in addition to provoking certain swift military and political responses on the part of the United States, caused to be implemented one of the most intensive aerial reconnaissance efforts ever directed against a single objective area. This effort, employing a variety of sensory media, has been continued up to the present time. The thousands of photographs acquired by virtue of this effort were used as the primary basis for major U.S. government decisions made during the Cuban crisis. We will now review some of these photographs in order to illustrate how they revealed the presence of Soviet offensive weapons on the island of Cuba and how they enabled us to monitor the dismantling of Soviet offensive weapon bases and verify the removal of this equipment from the island. In addition, we will discuss the remaining Soviet forces on the island of Cuba and how our aerial surveillance program is used to monitor their activities. By late October 1962, the Soviet Union had begun deployment of 3 offensive weapon systems on the island of Cuba. These included the medium-range ballistic missile, the MRBM, the intermediate-range ballistic missile, the IRBM, and the IL-28 jet bomber nicknamed Beagle. Neither the IRBM nor the Beagle ever reached full operational capability, because these systems were just being assembled or constructed when Chairman Khrushchev agreed to dismantle and remove his offensive weapons from the island of Cuba. The medium-range ballistic missiles, however, did achieve full operational capability on 28 October 1962, and we will review some of the photography covering these site areas. The Soviets had begun deployment of their offensive missiles at 9 locations in Cuba, as shown by this particular map. 6 were for the MRBM, 3 for the IRBM. The MRBM installations were located in this sector and at this location. 3 IRBM sites were located, 2 here at Havana and 1 farther to the east. These particular sites included firing facilities for 4 launchers at each location. The historic photograph of the Cuban crisis was acquired by a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft passing over the San Cristobal area in western Cuba early in the morning on 14 October 1962. In this wooded sector near San Cristobal, a Soviet MRBM unit was noted just apparently as it was being deployed. 8 medium-range ballistic missiles were uncovered by the photo interpreters. 4 at this location, 3 at this location, and a single one at this location. In addition, at this time, 4 erector launchers had already been emplaced at their firing positions. Also included were new tent areas and propellant vehicles identified in this wooded sector. As a result of the evaluations made of our high-altitude photography over the Soviet offensive missile bases in Cuba, the President directed that beginning on 23 October 1962, our low-level reconnaissance aircraft photograph these offensive bases in order to provide us precise detail on the nature of the facilities located. These aircraft caught the Soviets by surprise, and as shown here at San Cristobal Site number 1 on 23 October, you can see a Soviet missile erector placed under canvas with telltale command cabling leading back to the command and control equipment in a wooded sector here. Oxidizer tank trailers with prime movers and fuel tank trailers with prime movers are shown at these locations. The Soviets respond quickly to our low-level reconnaissance activities. They deploy conventional anti-aircraft artillery weapons at each of their offensive bases. As shown in this particular photograph, a 6-gun sight has apparently just been deployed in a circular configuration around a centrally placed guidance area. Notice, if you will, that the Soviet crews located at these varying points have just realized the approaching U.S. aircraft is upon them. They are running toward their respective weapon positions, but too late to fire effectively against the low-flying aircraft because it has acquired its photography and moved on to the next target. An assessment of the low and the high-altitude photography acquired over the Soviet offensive missile bases was prepared by the intelligence community. It was judged that the offensive missiles being deployed in Cuba, when completed, could have ranges of 1,100 and 2,200 nautical miles. The 1,100 nautical mile MRBM could reach all key target areas in the southeastern United States, as well as important cities such as Washington, D.C., St. Louis, and Dallas, Texas. Note, if you will, that the Panama Canal was also included within the range of this particular weapon system. The 2,200 nautical mile IRBM could reach most key target areas in the North American continent, with a small exception in Washington here and the state of Alaska. This particular weapon system could also reach key countries in South America. As a result of the assessment conducted by the intelligence community, the President directed that a quarantine of the island of Cuba be initiated. As a result of this quarantine, and as a result of an exchange of letters between Chairman Khrushchev and the President of the United States, Khrushchev agreed to dismantle his offensive missile bases and remove the components from the island of Cuba. The job of the reconnaissance planners was to provide adequate coverage of these offensive missile bases to ensure that they were destroyed and components removed from these areas. Our low-altitude reconnaissance aircraft again swept in over the Soviet offensive bases to confirm the dismantling process. Found at this location in San Cristobal Site number 2 is a former Soviet MRBM launching position. Bulldozers have churned back and forth and destroyed this site, and all that remain are large pieces of concrete. A similar destruction has occurred at this particular location. The MRBM missiles and the missile components were followed as they moved from the bases themselves along the roadways to the respective port areas of Cuba. They were observed as they were loaded aboard Soviet ships and departed the island. Here is the Soviet ship Kurchatov at the port of Casilda as it appeared in South Cuba on 6 November 1962. The ship has just completed its loading cycle. 6 MRBM missile transporters and missiles under canvas are already deck loaded, 2 in the forward section and 4 on the aft end. Forward hatch covers are closed. Rear hatches are being closed. The ship is under steam, and Soviet crewmen and technicians are in line boarding this ship prior to its departure for the Soviet Union. The shadow cast at this particular location is that of a United States RF-101 reconnaissance aircraft. In addition to the offensive weapon systems, the Soviets also deployed other weapon systems on the island of Cuba. These included 2 modern air defense systems. The first, a surface-to-air missile system known as the SA-2. The second, a high-performance interceptor fighter known as the MiG-21. In addition, a coast defense cruise missile system and a guided missile patrol boat system nicknamed Komar were also deployed on the island. Soviet ground forces and equipment are presently deployed at 4 major locations and several smaller locations on the island of Cuba. There are 24 surface-to-air missile sites presently deployed on the island of Cuba. One is shown here at Bahia Honda, Cuba, just west of Havana, and includes the typical 6 firing positions arranged in a circle around a centrally positioned, earth-revetted guidance area. Missiles fired from this particular site can reach aircraft flying as high as 80,000 feet. Key coastal beach areas of Cuba are defended by Soviet coast defense cruise missile systems. There are 4 operational sites presently deployed on the island. One is shown here near the small town of Siguanea on the Isle of Pines in South Cuba. It includes a firing area, which is enlarged at this location and also has 2 firing positions, one revetted and shown at this location, another revetted and shown at this location. Note the 36-foot-long rail launcher uncovered at this location, canvas covered at this location. Note also the camouflage and concealed guidance equipment found in these trench areas. Refire missiles and troop quarters are found in this particular sector. The Soviets have deployed the guided missile coastal patrol boat, nicknamed the Komar, at 2 locations in Cuba. One of them is shown on this particular photograph near Banas, on the eastern tip of the island. It includes a naval base at this location, a ship mooring point at this location, which is enlarged in this insert. Note the 4 Komar guided missile patrol boats, 1, 2, 3, 4. These boats measure 83 feet in length, weigh 66 tons, and have positioned on their aft end 2 20-foot-long cruise missile launching canisters. Cruise missiles fired from these canisters could reach hostile shipping out to ranges of 10 to 15 nautical miles. The defensive systems that we have reviewed today continue to be monitored by United States reconnaissance aircraft. The offensive systems, however, including the long-range ballistic missiles and jet bombers, have, in the judgment of the United States intelligence community, been removed from the island of Cuba. In summary, there is little doubt that the Soviet Union did embark upon a bold venture to establish clandestinely in the Western Hemisphere a major offensive weapons base, that they were deterred in this effort, and that we are now able to monitor the forces remaining on the island of Cuba is in large part attributable to the type of reconnaissance photography that we have just reviewed.
The challenges and dangers which face us in our hemisphere and elsewhere remain, and our preparedness to meet those challenges and dangers at whatever time and in whatever way may be necessary remains. Our position has been clearly summarized by the Secretary of Defense in these words.
We will not tolerate the use of Cuba as a base for the export of subversion, aggression against the other governments of the nations of the hemisphere.